Hello and welcome. In today's video I'm going to talk about what is termed Hermann Göring's shooting decree of the 17th of February 1933. And whereas the Reichstag Fire Decree is often quoted as being the first stage of the collapse of democracy in Germany leading to the Hitler dictatorship, there were two initial moves to curtail freedoms which need to be considered and which are usually overlooked by most. The first was the Ordinance for the Protection of the German People of the 4th of February 1933, and the second was Hermann Göring's shooting decree of the 17th of February 1933. Now, I have done a separate video on the Ordinance for the Protection of the German People, a link to which is given below, but I'll give you a summary now for the sake of completeness. Now, Hitler was appointed Chancellor by a cabal of wealthy conservatives around the president, and the point of appointing Hitler president was to hide a scandal known as the Eastern Aid scandal. That is to say, it was money which was paid to large landowners who lived east of the Elbe River, and this money was often used for corrupt purposes. If we look at what was discussed in the Reichstag in January 1933, you will see that a large amount of discussions were related to Eastern aid. I think this is really important to understand because this is the reason that Hitler was appointed Chancellor. It's nothing to do with any other reasons which are often given. Also, the people who appointed him thought that they'd be able to control him, to manipulate him, and above all to manipulate the thugs, the gangs that he had on the streets. So that's what it's all about. So, having appointed Hitler, only a few days later, there was the Ordinance of the 4th of February 1933, signed by President Paul von Hindenburg, only 5 days after Hitler became Chancellor. It was the first nationwide emergency decree used by the Nazi-led government to restrict political freedoms and suppress opposition, and it marked an early step in the destruction of the Weimar constitutional order. And what's important about this also is it was not devised by the Nazis. It was devised by the former government, which was why it just had to be pulled out of the drawer, as had earlier been said. I've got a decree and I'll just pull it out the drawer and I'll use it against you. And okay, the threat being given to the communists. Now, the ordinance significantly restricted fundamental civil liberties, including freedom of assembly. A political meeting could be broken up by the police or banned. Freedom of the press, and newspapers and publications could be censored, suspended, or confiscated. Freedom of expression, political speech deemed hostile to the state, could be suppressed. And I would like to say something about freedom of the press, because this is a really important thing to consider. It's not just the right to say what you want, but it's the following. It has economic implications. If there is a newspaper which belongs, let's say, to a national group, as most of them do, or did then as well, and if some local newspaper says something, the whole group's papers could be banned. Now, you can imagine the cost implications of something of this nature for the newspaper owners. Therefore, if you were the editor of a small newspaper in a small town somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you're not going to upset your boss in Berlin or wherever he or she may be and have the entire group's newspapers banned. That is the real effect of attacking the freedom of the press. The authorities were empowered to prohibit demonstrations, ban meetings, shut down publications, if they were considered a threat to public order and security. And who decided if they were a threat to public order and security? Because that interpretation would lay with the person making the decision. Now, there was a way of appealing, but I mean, if you just had all your newspapers shut down for one day or several days, then you make an appeal. Okay, then even if you're successful, what good's it going to do? The financial implications are horrendous. So now this ordinance was framed as a neutral measure to maintain order during an election campaign, but it was applied selectively. It was used against the Communist Party, the KPD, and the Social Democrats, SPD. Nazi meetings and propaganda weren't affected. I know of no single example of where this was used against the Nazis. There may be examples, and if you know of any, please write them down, but I don't know of any. Police authorities, who were increasingly under Nazi influence, enforced the decree, therefore, in a partisan manner. If you're a police boss, you might even be politically neutral or really don't care less too much, but you do want your career to advance, then you're going to do it in a way which is seen to work for the new authorities. In practice, this ordinance tilted the political playing field ahead of the March 1933 Reichstag elections, and it completely undermined free political competition. And there was a good reason for doing that as far as the Nazis were concerned. Their vote had dropped by 2 million people, 2 million less votes between the July 1932 elections, which had been their big breakthrough, which had put them as the largest party in the Reichstag, to the November 1932 elections. That is really important to understand. If this slide had continued, the Nazi Party would have been wiped out. It's also worth bearing in mind as well is that the economy by this time had started to turn. Okay, maybe it wasn't so visible for people on the ground, but okay, but it's I mean, in other countries as well, it had started to turn. The worst of the crash of started in 1929, the economic depression of the early 1930s, was by this time over for most of the people in Germany. Now, this ordinance was issued under Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution, which allowed emergency decrees. Unlike later measures, it didn't suspend the Constitution. Instead, it normalized emergency governance and established a precedent for rule by decree. So it was sort of a legal bridge, if you like, between constitutional government and open dictatorship. Now, the 4th of February Ordinance paved the way for more radical measures. It conditioned the police and administrative authorities to act outside legal constraints. It preceded the Reichstag Fire Decree of the 20th of February 1933, which suspended civil rights entirely. And so you've got these two decrees, which together give the legal framework for mass arrests, censorship, and the elimination of political opposition. So this is the first formal legal instrument of Nazi repression at the Reich level. It's a key step to in the incremental dismantling of democracy achieved through ostensibly legal means, and it's evidence that the Nazi seizure of power relied not only on violence, but on the manipulation of constitutional emergency powers. So I really think that this should be given some consideration. But to make it even worse, on the 17th of February 1933, now what's that, 2.5 weeks, not even 3 weeks, since Adolf Hitler became Chancellor, Hermann Göring, in his capacity of the Prussian Minister of the Interior, issued a directive that became colloquially known as the Schießerlass, the shooting decree, shooting permit, in fact, in some ways. Although it wasn't a formal law, the law had immediate and lethal consequences and marked a decline, a decisive indeed, escalation in the Nazi seizure of coercive power. So the decree was issued as an internal instruction to the Prussian police and then Prussia made up 2/3 of Germany approximately. Its central provision authorized police officers to use firearms without restraint against individuals deemed hostile to the state. Who decides if an individual is hostile to the state? Well, it's the policeman holding the firearm. Goring explicitly declared that police who used their weapons in the performance of their duties would receive his full political and legal backing, even if such actions resulted in death. Something I think that sort of reminds me of a modern politician as well, said words to a similar effect, but not quite as bad. Whereas the original hasn't survived, so we can't actually see the original decree any longer. There were enough in circulation to allow it to be reconstructed from internal documents and memoirs. So it read words to the effect of, and obviously this is now being translated, police officers who in the exercise of their duties against hostile organizations make use of firearms will be covered by me without regard to the consequences of the use of these firearms. Now, crucially, the order reversed the normal logic of police accountability. Rather than requiring officers to justify the use of legal force, Goring framed hesitation or restraint as a failure of duty. Police were told that any officer who didn't ruthlessly defend state authority risked disciplinary consequences, while those who used deadly force would be protected. Now, that might be bad enough, but the decree went much further in practice, and it cannot be in any way separated from Goring's simultaneous decision to deputize members of the SA, SS and Stahlhelm as auxiliary police. The decree further ordered the police to establish, and now again I'm quoting from memoirs because we don't have the exact thing anymore, to establish the best possible cooperation with national associations, in whose ranks the most important state supporting forces are represented. So that's to say, national associations obviously meant the SA, the SS and the Stahlhelm. So these formations in Prussia alone numbered tens of thousands. They were armed, they were uniformed, they were given police authority, they had no training, no legal discipline. Most importantly of all, these street thugs outnumbered the forces of law and order many times over. It's worth bearing in mind that the German army believed that it wasn't able to take on the SA, so much less would the police be able to actually fight them. But now you have these criminals, effectively street criminals, the people who have gone beating people up in the streets. They're being given police power, and who is going to then control them? So the decree reassured both police and auxiliary units that violence against political opponents was not only permitted, but it was expected. Killings would not be prosecuted, and responsibility would be absorbed at a local political level. This created an environment in which paramilitary violence was effectively legalized. Now, although the decree used a general language about threats to public order, its intent was unambiguous. Goring openly identified communists as the primary enemy and framed the police as being engaged in a form of internal warfare. Social democrats, trade unions and other opponents were quickly swept into the same category. And what about the timing? Well, it was before the Reichstag fire, it was before the Reichstag Fire Decree, and it was well before the establishment of a formal legal dictatorship. Is that right? Formal legal dictatorship? That sounds a bit wrong, but anyway, formal dictatorship. In effect, Goring created a de facto state of emergency in Prussia, Germany's largest and politically most important state. by an administrative order. So, in the weeks following the 17th of February 1933, political opponents were shot during raids, arrests, street confrontations. Killings were routinely justified as self-defense or resistance to arrest. And I've already done a video actually on this subject of how the Weimar judiciary frequently let Nazis off who claimed self-defense even though they'd ambushed people and started shooting them. Now, investigations, if they were opened at all, were dropped. And this is another thing we see, that where things are given to public prosecutors to investigate, but they're dropped. And I have actually covered this in a number of videos, but there's one thing I would like to do is to suggest you have a look at a video entitled "The First Victims of the Holocaust," where we see that there one or two very brave public prosecutors did look at murders which had occurred at Dachau concentration camp. So, but on the whole, I mean, people were cowed into submission. I mean, what would you do? I mean, most of us certainly wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't have the courage to actually stand up to gangs of armed thugs coming into my office and no way I can actually protect myself. So, this decree has collapsed the distinction between policing and political violence. So, violence no longer needed to be disguised as a judicial punishment. It could be presented as a preventative security. So the securing, I really think that this is a really critical step in transformation of the police from a law enforcement body protecting the rule of law and an instrument of ideological expression, accustoming police officers to operating outside judicial constraints, and it's a normalization of lethal violence as a tool of government. Anyway, so we came on to things like, after the Reichstag Fire Decree, there was the institutionalization of protective custody and the gradual removal of political policing from judicial oversight whatsoever. So Göring, he was thinking ahead here. This was an early prototype of the Nazi state, and this was later, obviously was later extended across all of Germany, the 1/3 that wasn't in Prussia. Göring's personal involvement was absolutely decisive. As Prussian Interior Minister, he controlled the largest police force in Germany. He was eager to demonstrate revolutionary resolve and to outflank rivals within the Nazi movement by showing that he could deliver rapid results against what he determined were their enemies. So this decree allowed Göring to terrorize political opponents without waiting for legal reforms, bind the police to the new regime through complicity. So now, if it was a neutral or a police officer or one who didn't really care too much, it meant he didn't like the Nazis. But now he is complicit in their crimes. So therefore, he's on their side. This was a signal that the old constitutional order was no longer operative in practice. So, long before the dictatorship was legally codified, Göring's order ensured that bloodshed could proceed under the cover of authority. In doing so, it sets a precedent that made later arrests, such as mass arrests, concentration camps, extrajudicial murders, administratively feasible and, possibly more importantly, psychologically routine. So, right, good. So, I hope you found that interesting, and maybe I went over the top with it a little bit, but I'm trying to make the point of how important it is. It's not the case as that this Reichstag Fire Decree, even at Nuremberg, you get the impression that it was the Reichstag Fire Decree. So I did a video on Göring's questioning at Nuremberg on the Reichstag Fire Decree, where Göring himself said, yeah, well, if the fire hadn't have happened, we're going to arrest these people anyway. And I think if you see it in this light, then that's fair enough. And it sort of actually does lead to a certain extent towards Göring's innocence on burning the Reichstag down. I think Göring was behind the Reichstag fire, but I admit there's no evidence to actually put him as being responsible. Particularly as, all these things he admitted to. There was no hesitation whatsoever in admitting them. So I hope you found it interesting. I upload every day at 2000 hours my time, because I live in Poland and in Germany. If you're interested in real history, and I do try to combat these myths as much as I can, then this is the place to be. If you want to subscribe, please press the bell as well, because if not, you will not be informed. I know this. I see the statistics come through to me. How many people received the video I did, and it's there's now about 47,000 subscribers or something at the time of doing this, and there is 10,000 at very best might be informed, and that really is going well. 10,000 get, so press the bell as well. But you know the times I'm uploading now. YouTube has been taking down my videos with no reason whatsoever, other than to claim it or promotes hate or something like that. I've been subject to various false copyright claims, which is a racket done by certain companies, and then you have to sort of somehow prove it's yourself in the video. So I'd have to prove this is my voice and this is me. I have to prove it, and not the person making the false copyright claim. And therefore, I've introduced this channel membership. Now, channel membership costs £5, $6, €6. Gives you access currently to more than 800 members-only videos. And this, unfortunately, is the way to go, because research history, unfortunately, it costs money. Whereas my videos are being buried under piles of slop and all the other things, I can't really compete. Anyway, I know I keep mentioning this, but I'm really wound up with this AI slop situation at the present. So if you're interested in all that, please take out membership if you can. But hey, there's one thing to do. It doesn't cost you anything. Write a comment below. Just have to write hello, how's the dog, something like that. She's dead actually, but you can write it all the same. You can always ask, and I'm sure she'd be pleased that you were asking. And that's something. That was something. And if you see other people writing hello, write hello back to them. Okay, that will create a little bit of traction, and that apparently helps the YouTube algorithm. For the moment, bye for now. Thanks for watching.